Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between the Epiphone SG Standard and the Gibson SG Tribute. Now, very quickly, I would like to address the elephant in the room. I know what the comments are going to be. It's fairly obvious here. There's going to be three main comments, aside from the legitimate ones. First and foremost, it's going to be, Epiphone is way better than Gibson. It's better to buy cheap. Gibson is overpriced. Sure, I can see that part at least. Gibson's trash. Epiphone is awesome. And then the other one's going to be, Gibson's way better. Epiphone is crap. Epiphone is made in China. Their custom shop is Chinese. That makes no sense. Epiphone is trash. Gibson is way better. Spend more money. And then the third one, which is, the helpful D-bag in the back there, which is just, they both suck. Sometimes people are just canoes. And hey, before the canoes get to you, these videos here will allow you to hear sound differences and might give you a little bit of, different perspective on certain guitars. Maybe you weren't thinking about this one. Maybe you weren't thinking about this one. That's what this video's for. The other side of the coin, rather than how does a guitar sound, which I find is most important, is how a guitar feels. So go to the store, track these down, find them for yourself, play them for yourself before you buy them. Find which one you bond with. Ignore what other people think. Don't let a bozo like me or any other goof on YouTube or whatever tell you what to buy. It doesn't make sense. Make that choice for yourself. But I do have 5 sound samples for you today, starting off with all 3 pickup positions in clean to appease certain people. And then, of course, I had fun with that. And then the final one, of course, because it is this channel, full on metal. So there are the 5 sound samples between the comparison here between the Epiphone SG Standard and the Gibson SG Tribute. Now, we're gonna talk, you know, kind of some of the similarities and differences and stuff like that. We'll go over some quick specs. But I do want to very quickly address the fact that I have a dog in this fight. I don't care, but I have a dog in this fight. So please keep that in mind. I own this, and I've rented this. So keep that in mind. But I mean, like, I really don't care. I don't rewatch these videos unless someone says, hey, what did you say at blah, 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 and you leave like a timestamp, or, you know, what did you play at, leave a timestamp, and then I'll go like, okay, I'm gonna go to the timestamp instead of like watching a whole video. I don't like doing that stuff. But anyway, let's talk about the guitars themselves. I'll move the camera so it makes more sense. All right, so we have the Gibson, which is made in USA, right here. Also has satin nitro finish on it, which some people really do prefer, although myself, I'm really in the gloss nitro finish camp. The Epiphone here, of course, yes, it is made in China, handcrafted in China. It has a polygloss to it. So the nitro finish seems to age well, much better than a polygloss finish does. So if that's something you're into, something to consider. Both of these guitars have some similarities, but both of these guitars have quite a bit of differences. So let's take a look at the bodies here. The horns on the Epiphone, might not be able to see that, a little thicker. The body itself, just about the same thickness to it. We've got mahogany bodies, of course. The Gibson here actually has a maple neck. It's also a rounded profile. So it's a lot thicker than the slim taper neck on the Epiphone here, which is also mahogany rather than this one that has maple. This has a rosewood fretboard, and this one here has a laurel fretboard. However, this is probably one of the nicest stocks of laurel I've ever seen. It is a little on the hard side to tell that it's actually laurel rather than rosewood. We have trapezoid inlays with a bound neck, or bound fretboard, and an unbound fretboard, and of course we did say that it is rosewood, and this has the dot inlays. Looking at the headstock, the Epiphone actually has the inlaid logo and the, what is that, holly leaf or whatever it is, or thistle, whereas we have the silk-screened Gibson logo here, and the holly thistle leaf thing is also silk-screened. Both of these also have Graphtec nuts. And as for tuners, they're both the vintage deluxe style. The Gibson are Gibson branded vintage deluxe, so more on the Clouson style with, there's a lot more tension in them. You can tell that they're made of thicker materials, and the pegs here are definitely a little thicker. The Epiphone has Wilkinson vintage deluxe, even though it does say online that it is Epiphone Vintage Deluxe. It's Wilkinson. It says Wilkinson on the back, which they're a little lighter, but they do the trick. I think they're actually really good tuners. You don't have to. Some of the like cheaper tuners and stuff like that, you have to kind of get a you know, like a head start on it. So you got to turn it a little bit, you know, like a half turn or something like that before it starts to grab the string. Not the case here. Of course, the Gibson has the 490R and 490T pickups, which are definitely hotter than the, oh man, the Alnico Classic Pro pickups that are on here. I think that's the pickups that are on here. There's a little more clarity in the 490R and 490T. I find that it shines through a little more clear on the high end, whereas the Epiphone, I do find they're not shrill, but they're a little harsh on the high end, which, you know what, if you're using this for like metal or like punk or something like that, or even just rock where there's not a lot of cleans and maybe you're shying away from some definition, that'll actually work in your favor. Now the big difference here, this is part of the modern collection. So that means it's not hand soldered. It has a PCB connections in the back, and they're Gibson branded potentiometers in them. Still great potentiometers, but here the Epiphone is part of the original collection, so it is hand soldered with CTS pots. Those pots are very, very nice, very responsive, and very accurate. One other thing I want to touch on here before I start to talk about just the Epiphone itself, because more than likely most people here are, they either own this and want to see, maybe a little bit of information about this one here, or they're kind of making the decision. Do you get this used or do you get this brand new? You might find this like $100 or $200 more used than this brand new. The gig bag case, the very thick padded gig bag case, and like a box, just to give you a little bit of information there. But there is one other thing I want to touch on here, and that is the fact that this is doesn't have the gloss on it. It has the satin nitro finish rather than this, which has a gloss. So what does that mean? A lot of people find this to be a little more comfortable. They find that it's a little faster neck-wise. I've always found the opposite. I've found it's a little faster with gloss, but I'm crazy and I'm ridiculous. But this will feel a little more resonant to you. So what does that mean? You're gonna feel a little more bass coming to you. So you're gonna feel a lot more of the low end in your body when you're playing it, rather than here, which you're gonna find a little more presence to it. So you're gonna find a little more of the mids and the high mids focused, like when you're playing it. That's what you're gonna feel. So this will feel a little more low end. This will feel a little more mid high end, and it can shine through when you're playing, if you're playing certain things with clarity, I guess you would say, in mind, rather than just full on blah. So I do want to touch on the Epiphone here, because there are a few things that I do have to say. I rented this guitar, and had I really bonded with it, I probably would have turned this rental into a purchase. Don't tell my wife. But that's definitely not happening with this guitar. It's a great guitar. I've gotten a lot of inspiration from it. I've written some very fun riffs with it as well. But it's just not something, I'm not like, I can't put it down, can't put it down. So there's a few things I really want to address here. I've already addressed the pickups. So these pickups here aren't as hot as the 490R and 490T. Doesn't matter. I prefer, I'm not a big fan of the hotter pickups. I prefer a little bit dialed back and reserved. But these here are a little harsh on the high end. So it's not one of those ones where it's going to distort a lot more easily on cleans and stuff like that. But if you're A-Bing this with a guitar that doesn't have harsh high-end pickups, you're really going to notice it. You can EQ it out, that's for sure. But again, if you have two guitars, you're going to have to switch. If the other guitar doesn't have this harsh issue, you'll have to go and change your EQ settings on your amp in between songs very quickly. Not that big of a deal. You can always change pickups. Most people do. Tuning stability wise, it holds its tune. It does very well, unless you put it down. So here's the big thing I've always found with SGs, or most guitars that have that kind of a headstock. Correct me in the comments because I really can't remember what it's called right now. It's horrible. But give this a try. So with your SG, if you have it, it's not going to work because I have a lavalier mic on, but pluck the G string and then put it down. Normally, because of the angle of the headstock, so here's the neck, here's the headstock, like that. When you put it down on the ground, there should be a little bit of kind of weight distribution. So it should go a little flat. That's normal. However, this one, and it could just be this one, goes severely flat. Not like a full step or anything like that, but it's very noticeable. And when I put this guitar here and I wiggle the neck, I can feel that there's a little bit of movement. It's not crazy, but there's a little bit of movement. So with that in mind, if you put this in a rack or if you lay it on the ground for a second, consider the fact that you're gonna probably have to retune it because it's more than likely gone sharp or some of them flat. That's just one thing I've noticed. Also, when I'm tuning from E to E flat or whatever tuning I'm going to, I usually go G, D, B, A, E, and then E. That's just how I do it. It's easier, like I have a lot of Fender and Gretsch guitars, so it's easier for me because that way you can kind of go back and check again. But what was happening, or what I find happening a lot, is that the strings will start to go sharp, sometimes flat, mostly sharp. So every time I'm doing that, there's movement, a little bit of movement in the neck, so I have to retune. Generally, I'll tune a guitar 3 times before recording. That's always just, you know, tugging on your strings, reseating the string in the nut, and then pulling tension on the tuning pegs. That's a good way to tune, right? This guitar here, I have to do it like 4 or 5 times. So like an extra 1 or 2 times to tune it. Not that big of an issue. From that point, it generally holds its tune if I'm just playing it. But again, if I put it down and pick it back up, I have to retune it. One thing to note. Again, this could just be with this particular guitar. But this is a good guitar. I'm just not bonding with it. I don't bond with every guitar. There's a reason why, for the most part, I'll go into the store and I'll try 10, 12, 15 guitars until one really speaks to me. That's just the best way to do it. Because you could be going into the store for this, but this feels better to you. Or you could be going to the store for this, but this feels better to you. It's really how you bond with the guitar. That's the most important part. So other people's opinions, yeah, you know what, you might be looking at it going like, oh man, well I bought the Epiphone rather than the Gibson, you know, might get a little bit of flack for that. But if this speaks to you and this inspires you and you bond with it, then the name on the headstock really doesn't matter. And you'll be able to work it so that people are surprised that it's the Epiphone, I guess you would say. But don't pay attention to other people. Don't let other people ruin your purchase. Just get the one that you want regardless of price, if you can afford it. But that's all I really want to say. I hate talking in these videos, and I'm quite frankly done. My plan now is to do another shootout with this, but I want to rent another guitar to do it. So as long as I can do that, as long as they have one available, I'll probably rent the Epiphone SG Satin Special E1. So that's like the entry-level SG, and I'll do a comparison with this one. I just think I'd like to play those back-to-back, and then I'll be able to do a whole bunch of videos with the SG Special Satin E1, whatever you call it. So, yeah, there you go. Thanks for watching.